Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the shadowy birth of the British Empire, that accidental juggernaut that clawed its way from a foggy island to grip a quarter of the world's land and people, like if your quiet suburbs suddenly sprouted tentacles and started bossing the planet around, all under the guise of afternoon tea and stiff upper lips. Picture this, you're huddled on a splintered deck in 1497, the raw bite of Atlantic salt searing your nostrils like a slap from the sea itself, as John Cabot, that sly Venetian with his borrowed English swagger, barks orders into the howling wind, his voice cracking like old leather while you clutch the rail, fingers numb from the relentless spray that soaks your woolen cloak until it hangs heavy as guilt, dripping with the chill that seeps straight to your bones and makes you question if glory's worth this endless, stomach-churning roll. Did you know that of the tiny crews braving these voyages, nearly 1 in 3 never returned, lost to scurvy's cruel grip, or waves that swallowed ship's hull without a trace, their last gasps echoing in the foam, or that this empire, history's largest, wasn't born from some master plan, but a bungled hunt for Asian shortcuts that landed you in frozen wastelands instead, where promises of silk turn to cod scales sticking to your frozen hands? What twisted fate turns a fishing expedition into a global web of exploitation, leaving railways as monuments while burying the displaced under forgotten earth? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lean into the wind, its icy fingers tangling your hair, as the Matthew crests another wave, slamming down with a thud that jars your teeth, the iron tang of rusted fittings mixing with the bile rising in your throat, and you glance at Cabot, his eyes wild with that feverish gleam of men chasing shadows, muttering about Henry VII's commission like it's a holy writ, though historians still debate if the king saw it as bold exploration or just a cheap gamble to rival Columbus without emptying his coffers, a modern equivalent to crowdfunding a startup that promises the moon but delivers a puddle. The deck slicks underfoot with seawater and fish guts from yesterday's meagre catch, your boots slipping as you haul ropes that blister your palms raw, wet wool chafing your neck like a noose tightening with each gust, and you feel the horror creeping in, not from storms but the quiet injustice of it all. These voyages funded by merchants who'll never taste the salt, while you and the crew sailors, dreamers, debtors become pawns in a game where the board stretches infinite and unforgiving. A fascinating tidbit slips into your mind amid the chaos. Early navigators sometimes stuffed their maps with dried herbs to ward off sea demons. Absurd pouches that smelled of lavender over rot. A desperate charm against the unknown that failed more often than it worked, leaving you to ponder the common mistake of confusing superstition for strategy. Lessons learned in watery graves where overconfidence drowned ambition. Zoom out for a breath, and the vast grey sea merges with the sky in a monochrome blur, a canvas where human dots like you paint lines of destiny that will bleed red across continents, connecting fates in ways that twist like the ropes burning your hands. You spot land at last, Newfoundland's jagged cliffs rising like accusatory fingers from the mist, and as the ship grates against the shallows, you wade ashore, legs wobbling from weeks at sea, the crunch of pebbles underfoot a stark contrast to the endless sway. But the air here carries a sharper bite, pine resin mingling with the metallic edge of frost-kissed rock, and Cabot plants the flag with a flourish, claiming it all for England. Though the Bearthuck shadows in the trees watch with eyes like embers, their silent presence a sad harbinger of the displacements to come, where your innocent fishing camps will morph into footholds that erase ways of life older than your king's throne. Sarcasm bubbles up in your thoughts like the foam at your feet. Oh, brilliant. You've discovered paradise. Now let's turn it into a factory for salted cod. Worse than slaving away in a dead-end job where the boss takes the credit and you get the blisters. The cod swarm in the shallows, silver flashes that you net by the hundreds, their scales embedding under your nails as you gut them on the beach. Blood and brine mixing into a slurry that stains your hands crimson, the stench rising thick and fishy, clinging to your wet wool now mutated with slime that crusts in the weak sun. And you think of the irony, how this Grand Bank's bounty draws fleets from Bristol each season, men like you enduring the crossing for wages that barely feed families back home, While merchants grow fat on the trade, a pattern that will repeat across empires. Exploitation wrapped in opportunity's shiny paper. Cabot's return voyage buzzes with tales of these riches, but you know the shocking truth his second expedition vanishes without trace, perhaps claimed by ice or mutiny, a debate among scholars who pore over fragments of logs, wondering if hubris or hurricanes sealed their fate, leaving you to haul more nets, the iron taste now of overworked muscles and swallowed pride. Back in Tudor England, you trudge through London's muddy streets, the fog thick as secrets, carrying bundles of dried cod that fetch prices to fund grander schemes. And Henry VIII's shadow looms larger now, his break with Rome in the 1530s scorching the air with heretic flames that singe your senses. The smell of burning flesh faint on the wind as monasteries dissolve, their wealth flooding into coffers that will build ships and dreams. But at what cost? You wonder, empathy welling for the displaced monks and the Protestant outsiders you've become. Isolated in a Catholic Europe that eyes you like prey, the wet wool evolves again, now heavy with London rain that smells of soot and sewage, chafing as you join crowds cheering Francis Drake, that pirate knight whose raids on Spanish gold taste of adventure but reek of violence. His circumnavigation from 1577, leaving trails of plunder that enrich the Queen but stain the seas with blood. And you smirk at the sarcasm of it all. Privateers as national heroes, like rebranding hackers as cybersecurity experts in today's digital Wild West. Zoom out once more, and the globe tilts on its axis. Tiny England punching above its weight through sheer audacity, where alliances like the ancient Anglo-Portuguese bond from 1373 weave a net of knowledge that pulls you deeper into maritime madness. Edward III's quill-sealing pacts against Castilian threats that echo in your current quests. The ink dry, but the ambitions wet with peril. You stand on Roanoke's swampy shores in 1585, vines snagging your legs like desperate hands. Fever buzzing in your ears as supplies dwindle. The Croatoan carving on a tree a chilling mystery that historians argue over was it massacre, assimilation, or starvation's final scrawl, and you feel the psychological weight, the sad vanishing of 115 souls into the mist, a lesson in the folly of unprepared settlement, common mistakes like ignoring indigenous knowledge that could have saved lives, now lost to the whispers of wind through empty huts. The iron on your teeth sharpens with rust from abandoned tools, wet wool mildewed in the humidity, and as you sail away, leaving ghosts behind, the question hangs heavy: how many more will disappear before this empire learns that conquest devours its own children first? You huddle in the dim glow of a flickering candle, its wax dripping like slow tears onto the scarred oak table. The damp chill of the treaty room seeping through stone walls that sweat with centuries of secrets, and you feel the parchment under your fingers, clammy and rough like skin peeled from a forgotten corpse, as King Edward III's quill scratches across it in 1373, binding England to Portugal in an alliance that smells of musty ink and calculated desperation. The air thick with the fog of ambition that blurs the edges of maps spread before you, where Castilian threats loom like shadows in the mist, and you wonder if this pact, the oldest in European history, is a lifeline, or just another chain disguised as friendship, its threads woven from greed that tugs at your gut like hunger after a failed harvest. The room's dampness clings to your woolen tunic, now mutated into a fog-soaked shroud that weighs on your shoulders, heavy with the moisture of London's perpetual grey, and you taste the iron on your teeth from biting down on a quill tip, sharp and metallic like the edge of betrayal lurking in every diplomatic smile, as Queen Eleanor of Portugal nods across the table, her eyes veiled in calculation, while historians still argue whether this treaty was born of genuine mutual defence or just a merchant's ploy to counter Spanish muscle. A debate that echoes through time like whispers in these stone halls, where one wrong word could ignite wars that drain blood and treasuries alike. You lean forward, the candle's flame dancing erratic shadows on the walls, illuminating clauses that promise eternal aid but hide the cold ambition fueling them, and you sense the injustice budding here. This union evolving from military shield to commercial gateway, opening doors to Portuguese charts that chart oceans you've barely dreamed of, but at what cost to the souls caught in between? A sad prelude to empires built on borrowed knowledge and broken backs. Sarcasm curls your lip as you sign your witness marker. The romance of alliances. like swiping right on a dating app only to find your match wants your wallet more than your heart. Worse than a bad blind date that drags on for centuries. A fascinating tidbit emerges amid the scratching quills. Medieval diplomats sometimes sealed pacts with wax mixed from beehives raided during border skirmishes. Absurd tokens of conquest melted into symbols of peace, their honey-sweet scent masking the bitter undercurrents of rivalry that will fester into oceanic grabs. Zoom out for a hushed moment, and the fog outside the window swirls like forgotten ghosts, wrapping the Thames in a veil where kingdoms rise and fall on whispers, connecting fates across seas that pulse with hidden currents of power and peril. You step into the fog-shrouded streets afterward, the alliance fresh like a wound not yet scarred, your boots squelching in mud that reeks of river rot and human waste, the damp permeating everything until your bones ache with it. And as centuries compress in this dreamlike haze, you find yourself in Tudor halls where Henry VII paces with ledger in hand, his cautious eyes weighing Cabot's reports like gold on scales. The Newfoundland claims now sprouting fishing fleets that brave the Atlantic's fury. But you feel the physical toll as you join one, the ship groaning under cod hauls that blister your hands raw, the fog mutating into a blinding veil that hides icebergs like lurking assassins, and you ponder the common mistake of underestimating the sea's wrath. Lessons learned in splintered hulls where overreach meets oblivion. The Alliance's fruits arrive in waves of knowledge. Portuguese navigators sharing secrets in taverns where ale flows bitter as regret. Their tales of African coasts and Indian spices igniting fires in your chest. But the horror creeps in with the Wars of the Roses aftermath. Fields still stained where nobility clashed. Your own kin perhaps lost in the filth of Bosworth. The iron taste now of rusted armour fragments you pick from old wounds, a shocking reminder that internal strife leaves kingdoms vulnerable. Ripe for the continental power's gaze, and empathy swells for the common folk like you. Ground between royal ambitions that treat lives as expendable as parchment scraps. You navigate the shifting religious tides under Henry VIII, the break with Rome in 1533 scorching the air with edicts that burn heretics at stakes you pass in the fog, the smoke acrid and choking clinging to your damp wool-like accusation, and you witness monasteries crumbling, their wealth funneled into naval dreams that will carry you farther. But the sad element hits as Protestant outsiders huddle in shadows, facing crusades from Catholic giants, Spain's armada looming like a storm on the horizon. Irony strikes again, dissolving holy houses to build unholy empires, like demolishing a church to erect a casino, all in the name of divine right that's anything but. The fog thickens as Elizabeth ascends in 1558 her court and nest of intrigue where you serve as a minor envoy, quill in hand drafting patents for explorers like Frobisher, whose Arctic quests in 1576 chase northwest passages through ice that cracks like breaking bones. Your own fingers numb from the cold tales he brings back. Fool's gold that crumbles to nothing. A debate among scholars if these failures were folly or necessary stumbles toward mastery. Lessons in resilience where persistence trumps preparation. You sail with Davis in 1585, pushing to 72 degrees north. The fog freezing into rime on lashes that sting like needles. Wet wool iced stiff as armour. And the physical event unfolds in treacherous waters, where bergs carve with thunderous roars, nearly crushing your vessel. The terror palpable as crew mutters of cursed latitudes. Zoom out once more, and the northern lights dance ethereal above, a poetic aurora veiling the harsh arithmetic of empire building, where each failed voyage adds coordinates to maps that will bleed with conquest's ink. The Muscovy Company forms in 1555, its charter warm in your pocket as you trek Russian snows with Jenkinson. Fur-lined but still chilled to the core, seeking overland routes to China through blizzards that howl injustice at displaced locals. The Alliance's echo in Persian markets where you barter under Ottoman eyes, the damp mutating to desert dust that grits between teeth like ground iron. You return with modest gains, but the horror lies in the slave trade's shadow. Hawkins' voyages from 1562, hauling human cargo across the Atlantic, chains clanking in holds that reek of despair. A shocking start to triangular torment that will consume millions, and you feel the empathy crush your chest for those stolen lives, treated as commodities in ledgers that ignore their screams. Sarcasm bites hard progress. They call it like upgrading from horse carts to human-fueled machines. Worse than a corporate merger where souls are the assets stripped bare. The room's fog lifts slightly as you ponder the absurd practice of using leeches to balance humours before voyages. Bloodsuckers prescribed for seasickness that leave you weakened and spotted, a futile remedy against the real parasites of ambition. The Alliance endures, its parchment now yellowed but binding, pulling you into Elizabethan privateering where Drake's raids in 1577 circle the globe, his knighting a twist on Cabot's humble flag planting, now glorified piracy that enriches the crown but sows hatred in Spanish hearts, the iron taste evolving to gunpowder residue on your tongue as you fire cannons in distant bays. You stand on Irish shores during early plantations, the fog heavy with peat smoke and resentment, as Munster's lands are seized, displacing natives in a laboratory of control that will export its cruelties worldwide. The sad displacement of families into bogs where hunger gnaws like rats, and historians debate if this was strategic necessity or the birth of systematic oppression, lessons in how conquest starts close to home before spreading like plague. The East India Company's charter in 1600 seals the shift, your quill hovering over monopoly rights that smell of spices yet to come, but you sense the chill of corporate empires rising, where merchants become rulers in fog-shrouded boardrooms, binding fates tighter than any treaty. The fog swirls thicker now, veiling the path ahead where alliances fracture under ambition's weight, leaving you with a psychological shiver what happens when ink dries, but the blood it spills remains forever wet. You grip the frost-rimmed rail as the ship plunges into another Arctic swell. Icy waves slapping your face like vengeful hands from the deep, their sting sharp and unrelenting, numbing your cheeks until they burn with a fire colder than any flame, and you ask yourself, did you know that Martin Frobisher's 1576 expedition hauled back tons of glittering ore thought to be gold, only for it to crumble into worthless pyrite back home, bankrupting investors and leaving crews like yours stranded in frozen hells where one wrong step meant death by exposure or the sea's merciless embrace? The air bites deep into your lungs, carrying the cod stench from Newfoundland's banks now frozen solid in your memory, mutated into a crystalline reek that clings to your nostrils like regret crystallized, and your wet wool, once fog-soaked, now stiffens with rime that cracks with every movement, chafing your skin raw as if the north wind itself weaves punishment into the fabric, while the iron on your teeth sharpens from gnawing on hardtack laced with salt and despair, a metallic bite that echoes the chains of ambition dragging you farther into this white void. You stand beside Frobisher, his beard iced over like a mad prophet's, eyes scanning the horizon for that elusive northwest passage to Asia's riches. But the fog evolves here into blinding snow squalls that swallow the ship whole, visibility dropping to arm's length as you navigate treacherous flows that groan and crack beneath the hull. The physical event unfolding in a desperate push through Baffin Island's bays, where you claim land that feels more curse than conquest, planting flags in snowdrifts that whisper of starvation as supplies dwindle to scraps. And historians still debate whether Frobisher's 3 voyages were bold innovation or reckless folly driven by Elizabeth's court, where whispers of Spanish gold fueled envy that blinded men to the Arctic's lethal truths. A fascinating tidbit chills you. Further sailors sometimes chewed on leather boot soles boiled soft to stave off scurvy, absurd meals that tasted of hide and hopelessness, their gums bleeding like accusations against the Queen's distant throne. Zoom out for a crystalline pause, and the aurora undulates above like spectral veins in the sky's pale flesh, pulsing with the indifferent rhythm of a world where human maps mean nothing to the ice that reshapes empires overnight. You haul the supposed gold ore aboard, rocks heavy as lies that strain your back until muscles scream, the sensory struggle intensifying as frostbite nips at your toes, turning them black and numb in boots that leak like sieves, and you feel a deep empathy for the Inuit shadows watching from sealskin kayaks, their ancient knowledge of these waters dismissed as savage superstition by men like you. A sad element in this tale where cultural clashes begin with ignored warnings that could save lives, but arrogance prevails, leading to ships trapped in ice packs that crush timbers with slow, inexorable pressure, much like how modern corporations ignore local expertise in remote projects, bulldozing ahead only to face billion-dollar lawsuits and environmental backlash. Sarcasm creeps in with the cold, brilliant plan, chasing passages that don't exist, like GPS leading you into a dead-end alley, because some app developer thought it knew better than the terrain, worse than trusting a faulty autocorrect to write your destiny. The ship groans onward, Davis joining the fray in 1585, his expeditions pushing to 72 degrees north, where the sun never sets but warmth is a myth. And you revisit Frobisher's ghost in these waters, a surprising twist as his fool's gold becomes paving stones for London streets, worthless yet enduring, symbolising the Empire's early stumbles where failure paves paths to persistence. Lessons learned in hypothermic haze that overambition without adaptation spells doom. Common mistakes like underestimating the cold's cruelty, which claims fingers and toes as tribute. You scan the horizon for land, spotting Frobisher Bay's jagged inlet, but joy sours as blizzards lash your face, snow pellets drawing blood like tiny knives, the cod stench now frozen out, replaced by the clean, sterile smell of endless white that hides crevasses waiting to swallow you whole, and the iron taste intensifies from licking chapped lips that split and bleed. A shocking reminder of the vanished crews before yours, perhaps entombed in ice that preserves their horrified expressions for eternity. Empathy wells again for the local peoples, their igloos warm havens you glimpse but never enter, dismissed in reports back home as primitive, yet their survival wisdom mocks your shivering form, a cultural injustice that seeds resentments blooming into future conflicts. The voyage turns nightmarish as supplies rot in the hold, maggots frozen mid-wriggle, and you ponder the academic uncertainty around these explorations. Were they scientific triumphs mapping unknown coasts, or mere commercial gambles veiled in national pride, debates raging in dusty tomes while you fight for breath in air so cold it sears your throat like swallowed shards? A modern aside hits like a thaw. It's like investing in crypto hype, chasing digital gold only to watch it crash, leaving you colder than a server farm in winter. Lessons in hype versus reality that echo across eras. You press on with Davis, the ship heeling against gales that howl like banshees mourning lost souls, and the wet wool cracks apart now, fibres brittle as your resolve, shedding flakes that mingle with snow, while the fog returns as auroral mist, veiling stars that mock your tiny presence. Zoom out once more, and the polar expanse gleams under moonlight like a vast, indifferent mirror, reflecting back humanity's folly and fractured light, where each crack tells a story of dreams deferred and lives expended. The return journey drags, sails tattered and crew thinned by scurvy's grip, teeth loosening in gums that swell purple, and you feel the psychological weight of failure, the passage unfound but knowledge gained in hard-won charts that will guide future fools. A twist on Cabot's earlier claims where Newfoundland's fish now seem tame compared to this frozen abyss. Sarcasm whispers through chattering teeth. Congratulations on discovering more ways to die. Like upgrading your survival game from easy mode to Arctic nightmare, where the only prize is living to regret it. The iron on your teeth dulls to a persistent ache from clenching against the pain, and as England's distant shores emerge from warmer mists, you carry scars that throb with every step, the sad legacy of voyages that claim more than they give, injustices etched in frostbitten flesh. The dock approaches, crowds oblivious to your ordeals, and you step ashore, legs unsteady on solid ground that feels foreign now, the air mild but carrying hints of the cold that lingers in your bones forever. The phantom voyages fade into logs and legends, but the chill remains, a question freezing in your mind how many more frozen dreams must shatter before the Empire learns that some passages lead only to oblivion. You taste the acrid smoke before you see the flames, its bitter tang coating your tongue like ash from a funeral pyre. As the heretic's pyre crackles in the marketplace square in 1555 under Mary the Rhine's bloody reign, the heat scorching your face even from the crowd's edge where you press among the murmuring masses, sweat beading on your brow and mixing with the fog that's evolved into a smothering haze heavy with charred wood and fear, and you can't help but question. Did you know that over 280 Protestants burned at the stake during her 5-year terror, their screams echoing as warnings that turned England's soul Protestant forever, flipping a nation from Catholic obedience to defiant heresy in a blaze that still singes history's pages? The flames leap higher, licking at the bound figure whose robes catch like dry tinder, the sensory struggle hitting you as embers sting your eyes, and the stench of burning flesh crawls into your nostrils. mutating the cod reek from northern voyages into something far fouler, a human rot that clings to your damp wool now singed at the edges, chafing your skin with prickly heat while the iron on your teeth sharpens from clenching against the horror, metallic and unyielding like the chains rattling around the stake. You shift uneasily, the physical event unfolding as royal guards shove through the throng, their pikes glinting under torchlight that flickers erratic shadows on stone walls etched with soot. And you recall Elizabeth's ascension in 1558, her Protestant restoration, a twist on Mary's flames, turning the pious victims into martyrs that fuel a naval defiance against Spain's Catholic might. Historians debating whether this religious whiplash forged England's maritime spine, or merely masked the greed driving it all, the uncertainty lingering like smoke in the air. A fascinating tidbit burns into your mind amid the chaos. Executioners sometimes doused heretics with gunpowder bags for quicker mercy. Absurd pouches that exploded in merciful blasts, sparing prolonged agony but scattering horrors in the crowd like you, who dodge flying embers that sear like accusations. Zoom out for a smoky interlude, and the night sky above London wheels with stars veiled in haze, a cosmic bonfire where earthly faiths clash like sparks from flint, illuminating paths to power that scorch everything in reach. You flee the square as the crowd disperses, heart pounding with empathy for the silenced voices, their sad ashes scattered on winds that carry injustice forward, and you slip into shadowed alleys where pirate whispers beckon, the fog thickening to moonlight mist that gleams on cobbles slick with night dew, leading you to harbours where Francis Drake loads his ship under cover of darkness in 1577, his blade at your side as you join the crew, the steel cold against your palm, carving paths through waves that heave heavy with stolen Spanish gold, and the bitter regret of lives shattered in raids that enrich the Queen but stain your hands with phantom blood. The ship rolls out to sea, sails billowing like ghosts in the wind, and sarcasm drips from your thoughts like the saltwater spray. Oh, the nobility of privateering, state-sanctioned piracy, where you rob galleons in the name of God and country, like a corporate raider rebranded as a hero in today's boardroom battles. Worse than hacking a rival server and calling it competitive intelligence. You clash blades on a Spanish deck off Panama, the clash ringing in your ears as treasure chests spill coins that clink like hollow promises, the shocking elements striking as enslaved Africans below decks gaze up with eyes hollow from the triangular trade Hawkins pioneered in 1562, their chains a sad chain, linking Africa to Caribbean plantations where sugar will sweeten English tea but sour countless souls. And you feel the deep empathy crush your chest for these stolen lives, treated as cargo in holds that reek of despair and vomit, a common mistake of those early empire builders who saw humans as commodities, lessons learned too late in revolts that will rock ships and conscience alike. The moonlight gleams on pirate shadows now, mutating the northern ice's chill into tropical humidity that soaks your wool further, heavy and rank with sweat and gunpowder, chafing as you haul plunder aboard, the iron taste evolving to coppery blood from a grazed knuckle in the fray. And you ponder the academic debate around Drake's circumnavigation glorious feat or lucky plunder spree, where his knighting by Elizabeth twists the tale from rogue to royal favourite, revisiting Cabot's humble flag planting with a surprising edge of sanctioned theft that elevates piracy to policy. A modern comparison flashes like cannon fire. It's like whistleblowing on a corrupt CEO only to get promoted for exposing the loot, turning theft into triumph in a world where winners write the logs. You sail onward, the waves carving regrets deeper with each league, evading Spanish pursuers in fog banks that swallow pursuits like secrets, and the sensory struggle intensifies as rope burns stripe your palms, blisters weeping clear fluid that stings in the salt air, while empathy swells for the indigenous crews pressed into service, their knowledge of currents dismissed until storms prove them right, a sad dismissal that seeds resentments blooming into future uprisings. Sarcasm whispers through the rigging, congratulations on your heroic raids, like swiping left on ethics to right swipe fortune, where the Queen's share leaves you with crumbs and a conscience that itches worse than scurvy rash. Zoom out again, and the ocean expanse shimmers under moonbeams like a silver shroud, veiling the stolen lives below decks in waves that rock eternal, where each crest hides histories of regret that surface in unexpected storms. You dock in Plymouth triumphant yet tainted, crowds cheering as gold pours into royal coffers, but the heretic flames echo in Protestant winds that scatter Spanish armadas in 1588, your ship among the agile fleet that outmaneuvers Philip's invincible force. Fireships blooming in the night like vengeful pyres. The shocking defeat twisting Mary's Catholic legacy into Elizabeth's divine favour. A debate on whether it was tactics or tempest that saved the day. Lessons in adaptability where rigid faith meets flexible fury. The iron on your teeth grinds from cannon recoil. Wet wool steaming in the battle's heat, now singed and salted into an armoured second skin that chafes with victory's price. And as debris washes ashore, you feel the psychological chill of what follows Ireland's plantations, where you march through bogs that suck at your boots like grasping hands, displacing natives in Munster's mud where famine whispers, a sad chain from religious fires to colonial shadows. Empathy for the evicted who fade into mists like ghosts of your own making. The pirate blades gleam one last time in moonlight as you sheath yours, the fog returning thicker, pregnant with the Empire's growing shadows, leaving you with a mood that shifts like tides what happens when heretic flames forge pirate legends, and the stolen lives carve regrets that no wave can wash away. You wade through the sucking mud of Roanoke's swampy fringes, thorns snagging your leggings like greedy fingers pulling you down into the mire, their pricks drawing beads of blood that sting sharp in the humid air, thick with mosquito hum and the rot of decaying vegetation. And you can't shake the question. Did you know that of the 115 souls who vanished from this cursed island in 1587, not a single bone or artifact has ever surfaced to explain their fate, leaving behind only the word Croatoan carved into a tree like a final, mocking riddle from the mist. The fog rolls in heavy now, evolved from the Arctic's icy veil into a warm, cloying blanket that clings to your skin, mutating the wet wool of your doublet into a steaming prison that chafes with every sloshing step, heavy and sodden as if woven from the swamp's own despair, while the iron on your teeth grinds from chewing on sour berries that do little to quell the hunger gnawing at your belly like a persistent worm, metallic and bitter like the taste of promises unkept in this godforsaken wilderness. You stumble upon the settlement's edge, the physical event erupting as vines choke abandoned huts whose thatch roofs sag under relentless rains, and you push through a door that creaks like breaking bones, finding inside only scattered tools rusted to uselessness, the air stale with mildew that crawls into your lungs, making each breath a struggle against the fever chills that rack your body in waves, hot flashes alternating with shudders that leave you trembling on the dirt floor, empathy swelling for the women and children who huddled here, their sad whispers of hope fading into the mist as supplies ran dry, and alliances with the Croatoan frayed under mistrust. A fascinating tidbit haunts you amid the decay colonists' sometimes fashioned armour from boiled leather, hardened with tree sap, absurd plates that cracked like eggshells in the humidity, offering scant protection against arrows or the swamp's insidious fevers. Their makeshift defences a desperate farce against nature's indifference. Zoom out for a vaporous breath, and the island's canopy stretches like a green shroud over hidden graves, where the earth's humid breath exhales secrets that twist through roots and vanish into ether, connecting lost lives in a web of forgotten threads. You trace the carving on the post, fingers rough against the bark etched with Croatoan, and sarcasm bubbles up through your chills. Perfect. A cryptic message like a bad escape room clue, where the exit leads to assimilation or massacre, worse than a GPS glitch stranding you in a dead zone with no signal and a dying battery. Historians still arguing whether it signaled friendly relocation to nearby tribes or a slaughter's silent scream, a debate that underscores the common mistake of these early ventures, underestimating indigenous politics and over-relying on resupply ships delayed by wars back home. Lessons learned in empty villages where isolation bred despair deeper than any blade. The fever spikes, blurring your vision as shadows dance in the hut's gloom, shocking you with hallucinations of John White's return in 1590, that artist father whose drawings of Algonquin life detailed sketches of tattooed warriors and corn dances now seem mocking in their beauty, capturing a world you invaders shattered without understanding, and you feel the deep empathy crush your chest for his granddaughter Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America, vanished at 3, her tiny cries perhaps silenced by famine or raid, a sad emblem of innocence lost to ambition's maw, The mist thickens outside, carrying distant drumbeats from Sekatan villages where alliances sour, your attempts at trade turning tense as arrows whistle past in warnings. The sensory struggle intensifying as leeches latch onto your calves in the shallows, their suck drawing blood that warms the chill water, and you pry them off with fingers slippery from pus. The iron taste now mingled with swamp muck that fouls your mouth when you gasp for air. A modern comparison flickers like fireflies in the dusk. It's like launching a startup in uncharted markets, pouring in cash only to watch it sink into regulatory swamps, team vanishing one by one to burnout or better offers, leaving you with empty offices and a for lease sign as cryptic as that carved tree. You revisit Drake's pirate ghosts here, a surprising twist as his plundered gold funds these colonies. But the wealth evaporates in Roanoke's failures, turning treasure into tragedy, where Spanish raids loom like storms on the horizon, forcing White's desperate sail back for supplies, only for the Armada's chaos to delay him 3 years, a delay that dooms the lot. Lessons in timing's cruelty where wars at home devour dreams abroad. The vines creep closer, thorny tendrils wrapping the palisade like nature reclaiming its own, and you huddle against the fever's grip, shocking visions of massacre flashing. Perhaps Powhatan warriors descending in retribution for stolen corn, or starvation driving cannibal whispers in the night. Though evidence scant leaves the horror to imagination's cruel play, sarcasm cuts through the haze bravo on your New World paradise, like booking a tropical getaway only to find it's hurricane season with no evacuation plan, where the brochure's beaches hide quicksand and regret. Zoom out once more, and the Atlantic whispers beyond the trees, a vast murmur where ships like White's arrive too late, sails billowing empty promises over waves that cradle the lost in eternal fog, their stories dissolving into myths that haunt the shores. You stagger to the beach, the mist parting briefly to reveal canoes gliding silent on the sound, Croatoan figures vanishing like smoke, and the psychological chill settles deep as you realize this vanishing act foreshadows empires built on absences, where colonies rise on the ghosts of the erased, a mood shifting to weary resignation. What if the real monster isn't the swamp, but the hubris that plants flags in soil soaked with unspoken tears? You sink your bare feet into the sticky Virginia soil, its warm mud squelching between your toes like living flesh yielding under pressure, the humidity pressing down like a wet blanket that soaks your ragged shirt until it clings transparent and heavy. And you gasp at the statistic that by 1619, when the first enslaved Africans arrived at Point Comfort aboard a Dutch ship, tobacco had already transformed this swampy outpost into a profit machine devouring lives, with one plant requiring hours of back-breaking labour per day per worker, turning green leaves into gold for distant lords while chaining generations to fields that reek of sweat and despair. The air hangs thick with the sweet sour rot of curing leaves, their aroma mutating the swamp mist from Roanoke's cloying veil into a cloying perfume that masks the undercurrent of human misery. Your wet wool breeches, once sodden from English rains, now sweat-drenched and itching with chafed thighs that burn like fire ants marching across your skin, while the iron on your teeth grinds from clenching against the overseer's whip crack, echoing in the distance, metallic and relentless like the manacles you glimpse on wrists darker than your own, forged in Liverpool foundries that profit from this distant hell. You bend to tend the rose, the physical event erupting as thorns from wild undergrowth slice your palms open, blood mixing with dirt into a gritty paste that stings with every pluck of a leaf, the sun beating down merciless like an unblinking eye judging your every falter, and you haul the harvest baskets, shoulders screaming under the weight that bows your back like an old tree in storm. Revisiting John White's lost Roanoke with a surprising twist, the vanished colonist's fate perhaps sealed by tobacco's lure, drawing settlers to these very fields where promises of land turn to indentures trap, historians debating whether the crops boom was economic salvation or the original sin that embedded slavery into America's bones, the uncertainty that lingers like the smoke from curing barns billowing black against the sky. A fascinating tidbit worms into your aching mind amid the toil planters sometimes buried tobacco seeds with human hair clippings for fertility, an absurd ritual blending superstition with the macabre, strands from enslaved heads mingling with soil that drank their sweat, creating crops haunted by the very lives sustaining them. Zoom out for a laboured breath, and the Chesapeake's vast plantations unfurl like a green quilt stitched with human threads, where rivers wind silver veins carrying away fortunes built on bent backs. Connecting this humid hell to London's opulent parlours in a chain of commerce that pulses with hidden cruelties, you wipe sweat from your brow, the sensory struggle intensifying as blisters swell on your heels from endless trudging, popping with salty agony that seeps into the earth, mixing with the blood of those chained beside you, their eyes hollow with a sad resilience that breaks your heart. The shocking element hitting as a young African, fresh from the Middle Passage where 1 in 6 perished in holds reeking of vomit and death, collapses nearby from heatstroke. His gasps a ragged symphony of injustice that echoes the fractured promises of freedom after 7 years' indenture, now hardening into hereditary bondage for those deemed other by skin alone. Empathy flooding you like the James River's tide for these souls ripped from homelands, their languages silenced under the lash. Sarcasm curls your parched lips' splendid crop. This tobacco, turning lungs black back home while blackening lives here, like inventing a smartphone that addicts users but chains the factory workers, worse than a viral trend that goes global at the cost of forgotten faces. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows that dance like spectres over the fields, and you ponder the common mistake of these early planters, prioritizing short-term yields over sustainable soil, lessons learned in depleted lands that force expansion westward, devouring indigenous territories in a hunger that mirrors the crop's insatiable thirst. A modern aside sweats through your thoughts. It's like fast fashion today, churning out cheap threads that fill landfills while exploiting distant labourers, profits puffing up like smoke rings that vanish, leaving stains that endure. You straighten as the bell tolls end of day, muscles knotting in protest, the iron taste now laced with tobacco dust that coats your tongue like regret's residue, and you shuffle to the quarters, crude cabins leaking rain that turns floors to mud slicks, where whispers of rebellion flicker like forbidden flames, shocking you with tales of runaways vanishing into swamps only to be hunted by dogs whose bays chill the night air. Empathy deepens for the indentured like yourself, poor from Britain's slums, tricked by pamphlets promising paradise but delivering this bondage, a sad parallel to the enslaved whose chains are literal, forging hierarchies that pit suffering against suffering and divide and conquer cruelty. The mist rises from the river as night falls, carrying mosquito swarms that buzz and bite, their pricks adding to the day's tally of pains, and sarcasm whispers through the dark welcome to the New World economy, where leaves are king and humans are mulch, like joining a pyramid scheme thinking you're at the top, only to find yourself buried at the bottom with the roots. Zoom out once more, and the moon hangs low over the tobacco sea, a pale eye witnessing the green waves that hide chains and dreams alike, where each rustle conceals stories of resistance blooming quiet in the shadows. You lie on a cornhusk pallet, the damp seeping through to chill your bones despite the heat, pondering the academic uncertainty around slavery's hardening. Did laws evolve from economic need or racial fear? Debates in faded ledgers that ignore the human cost counted in scarred backs and stolen futures. The night's quiet broken by a distant cry, perhaps a child born into this cycle, and the psychological chill settles like dew. How does a plant so fragile birth bond so unbreakable? And when will the harvest of suffering finally wither? You slash through the towering cane stalks, their razor-sharp edges whipping across your bare calves like vengeful lashes from invisible overseers, drawing thin lines of blood that trickle warm and sticky down your legs to mix with the sweat, pooling in your worn boots. And you reel from the fact that by 1650, a single Barbados plantation could churn out sugar worth more than all of England's wool exports combined. Yet for every ton of sweet crystals shipped across the Atlantic, it consumed the lives of dozens of enslaved workers who dropped dead from exhaustion before ever tasting freedom's flavour. The tropical heat envelops you like a living thing, a vice squeezing your chest until breaths come shallow and laboured, the air thick with the cloying sweetness of molasses fermenting in the sun, mutating the tobacco field's dusty residue from Virginia into a syrupy haze that coats your throat and makes every swallow feel like gulping down regret. Your wet wool shirt once chilled by northern fogs, now a steaming rag plastered to your torso, chafing raw patches on your ribs that burn with the friction of endless motion, while the iron on your teeth clenches from biting down on a fibrous cane stalk for fleeting relief, metallic and gritty like rust flaked from the chains clanking nearby. You swing the machete again, the physical event exploding as a stalk topples with a fibrous snap, revealing a nest of ants that swarm up your arm in a prickling tide, their bites adding pinpricks of fire to the sensory struggle already overwhelming you. The sun's glare blinding off dew-slick leaves, humidity beading on your brow to sting your eyes like acid tears, and blisters swelling on your palms from the tool's rough handle that slips with sweat, turning each cut into a battle against your own faltering grip. The plantation stretches endless under the Barbados sky, rows upon rows like a green labyrinth trapping souls, and you glimpse the boiling house where cauldrons bubble with molten sugar, steam rising acrid and scalding, shocking you with the sight of a worker's arm plunged in by accident, his scream cut short by fainting as the flesh peels away in layers, a sad tableau of routine horror where life expectancy for the enslaved hovers at a mere 7 years. Empathy flooding your veins like the rum distilled from this very hell. For these men and women dragged from West African shores, their families shattered in raids funded by the same merchants who toast with the product of their pain. A fascinating tidbit gnaws at you amid the swing planters sometimes fed exhausted workers skimmings from the boiling vats. Absurd frothy sludge laced with impurities that passed for sustenance. Bloating bellies while starving bodies. A desperate concoction that mocked nutrition like poison disguised as porridge. Zoom out for a sweltering sigh. And the Caribbean Sea glimmers beyond the fields like a mocking mirror, reflecting azure skies over this earthly inferno where waves once carried ships of hope, but now lap at shores stained with the sweat of the silenced, connecting islands in a chain of sweet exploitation that binds continents in bitter trade. You pause as the overseer cracks his whip nearby, the sound slicing the air like thunder, driving a line of chained figures forward, their backs scarred in crisscross patterns that weep under the sun, and sarcasm slithers through your heat-addled mind marvelous efficiency. This sugar economy, turning human endurance into export gold, like a modern factory farm cramming chickens into cages for cheap eggs. Worse than a sweatshop app that tracks your every move while the CEO sips lattes in air-conditioned bliss. The heat presses harder, vision blurring as dehydration sets in, and you revisit Drake's pirate shadows with a surprising twist. His plundered Spanish silver now invests in these very plantations, funding the shift from small farms to vast estates after sugar's introduction in the 1640s, borrowed from Dutch techniques in Brazil, where absentee owners like you imagine them lounging in London parlours, grow wealthy on absentee cruelty. Historians debating whether this boom was innovative agriculture or the blueprint for industrialised slavery, an uncertainty that hangs heavy as the humid air. Lessons learned in depleted soils and depleted lives where monoculture's greed exhausts both land and labour without mercy. A modern comparison sweats into focus. It's like binge-watching a hit series that hooks you with sweetness, but leaves you hollow and addicted. Profits soaring for creators while fans burn out on endless seasons. Echoing how sugar hooked Europe but hollowed out the Caribbean. You trudge to the mill, where oxen circle endlessly, their hooves churning mud into slurry that splatters your legs. The shocking grind of cane between rollers crushing not just stalks but spirits. As a young boy no older than 10 loses fingers to the machinery, his wail piercing the din before he's dragged away, bandaged roughly and sent back to work. Empathy crushing you for the children born into this cycle, their tiny frames bent early by loads that warp spines forever, a sad inheritance where freedom's whisper dies unborn. The sun dips toward horizon, casting long shadows that dance like freed spectres over the fields, and sarcasm bites again cheers to the Empire's sweet tooth, where crystals sparkle in teacups while screams dissolve in the boil, like scrolling past famine picks to like a dessert post, oblivious to the chain from field to fork. Zoom out once more, and the sunset bleeds red over the cane sea, a crimson wash painting the exhaustion in hues of false beauty, where each swaying stalk hides a story of silenced endurance that rustles eternal in the trade winds. You collapse at day's end in a thatched hut leaking rain, the damp returning as thunderstorms brew, mutating your wool into a fungal nest that itches with mould. Iron taste now soured by bile from meagre rations of cornmeal mush, laced with weevils, and the psychological chill creeps in despite the heat. How does something as fragile as sugar-forged chains stronger than steel? And when will the harvest of screams finally sour the sweetness for those who feast far away? You choke on the first lungful of monsoon rain as it hammers down like 1,000 accusing fingers, drenching you to the core in seconds and turning the deck of the East India Company ship into a slippery trap where every step risks a bone-jarring fall, and you reel from the revelation that by 1757, when Robert Clive's ragtag force of 3,000 men crushed an army 10 times larger at Plassey, it wasn't superior British steel that won the day, but a web of bribes and betrayals that handed Bengal's riches over on a silver platter laced with poison, flipping a trading post into a territorial monster that would swallow India whole, while leaving millions starving under the company's thumb. The downpour pounds your skull. Rivulets streaming into your eyes and blurring the jungle-lined riverbanks where mangroves twist like gnarled hands reaching from the muck. The air humid and alive with the rot of decaying leaves that mutates the Sugar Isle's syrupy haze into a fetid soup, crawling up your nostrils, making each breath a gag reflex against the fever brewing in your chest. Your wet wool jacket, once sweat-soaked in Caribbean fields, now a waterlogged beast clinging to your frame like a drowning parasite, swelling and chafing your underarms raw with every heave of the oars, while the iron on your teeth clenches from biting into a beetle nut for futile relief. Metallic and tangy like the blood you'll soon taste in these spice-scented wars. You clutch the rail as the ship lurches up the Hooghly River, the physical event surging when Dutch rivals' vessels emerge from the steam like spectral predators, cannons belching smoke that mingles with the rain in acrid clouds burning your throat, and you fire back, the recoil slamming your shoulder like a mule's kick, splintered wood flying as grape shot rips the rigging, shocking you with the sight of a sepoy ally crumpling beside you, his turban unravelling in the muddied deck as blood pools dark and slick. A sad casualty in this corporate clash, where Indian soldiers fight for English profits, empathy surging through your rain-lashed veins, for these men pressed into service by subsidiary alliances that promise protection but deliver only deeper subjugation. Their families back in villages ravaged by company taxes that squeeze life from the soil like wringing a rag dry. A fascinating tidbit slithers into your fevered thoughts amid the chaos company agents sometimes dose themselves with opium-laced tonics to ward off malaria. Absurd elixirs that blurred battles into hallucinatory nightmares, turning gunfire into thunderous apparitions while the drug's grip hooked them as surely as it would later ensnare China. Zoom out for a drenched reverie, and the Bengal Delta sprawls like a flooded vein network pulsing with monsoonal blood, where rivers carry spices downstream to ships that haul away fortunes, connecting steamy jungles to foggy London in a torrent of trade that drowns cultures in its wake. You reload your musket, powder soggy and fizzing unreliable in the deluge, the sensory struggle mounting as leeches latch onto your ankles in the flooded bilge. Their suck a dull throb, adding to the mosquito bites swelling your neck into itchy welts that pulse with infection's promise, and sarcasm drips from your waterlogged lips. Splendid spice wars, where nutmeg and cloves spark bloodbaths bloodier than sibling rivalries over the last cookie, like tech giants battling for App Store dominance, while users pay the hidden fees in privacy and peace. The battle turns as Clive's betrayal pays off. The Nawab's general Mir Jafar switching sides mid-fray in 1757 for promised riches. A twist revisiting Drake's pirate raids with corporate cunning. Now, it's not sea plunder, but land grabs veiled as alliances, where the East India Company morphs from merchant to mogul overnight, historians debating whether Plassey's victory was military genius or mere mercenary flip, an uncertainty that echoes in the rain's relentless drum. Lessons learned in flooded fields where greed's shortcuts flood over ethical banks. Common mistakes like trusting turncoats who turn again when the price rises higher. A modern comparison floods your mind like the rising river. It's like a startup merger gone sour, where backroom deals promise synergy but deliver backstabs, worse than a viral TikTok challenge that hooks millions but crashes servers and careers in the backlash. You wade ashore as the rival ship sinks in flames, the heat cutting through the rain in waves that steam off your wool, now a boiling cauldron that scalds your skin beneath, iron taste sharpening with gunpowder, residue licked from lips chapped by wind, and you march into the jungle where feverish illusions dance in the undergrowth, shocking visions of company factories rising like fortresses amid rice paddies, where local weavers starve as English textiles flood markets, destroying crafts older than your queen's lineage, empathy crushing you for the artisans reduced to beggars, their looms silent as graves in villages taxed to ruin, a sad symphony of progress that silences songs passed down generations. The monsoon eases to a drizzle, but betrayal thickens the air as you negotiate with Mughal remnants, their silken tents sagging under rain that leaks through like tears of a dying empire, and sarcasm hisses in the steam. Congratulations on your subsidiary system. Wellesley's masterpiece from 1798 that forces princes to pay for their own occupation, like charging a hostage for the ropes binding them. Worse than a subscription service that auto-renews your subjugation. Zoom out once more, and the Indian subcontinent steams under storm clouds like a pressure cooker of ambitions, where rivers of spice flow into oceans of conflict, each drop hiding illusions of control that evaporate in the heat of resistance. You press deeper into the foliage, vines snaring your legs like living traps, the fever spiking now with chills that rattle your bones despite the swelter, and the psychological chill deepens as illusions solidify ghost ships of Portuguese and Dutch rivals fading. But new betrayals brewing in company ledgers that value lives in pounds and pence, a mood shifting to wary dread what illusions lurk in these steamy depths, where spices season victories that taste increasingly of ash and inevitable reckoning. You flinch as the arrow embeds in your thigh with a wet thud, its barbed tip grinding against bone like a key turning in a rusted lock, sending shockwaves of fire up your leg that buckle your knees into the snow-dusted frontier soil. And you gasp at the grim tally that during King Philip's War in 1675, 1 in 10 New England colonists perished proportionately more than in any American conflict, since turning sleepy Puritan towns into charnel houses where alliances with native nations shattered like brittle ice under the weight of mutual betrayal and unchecked greed. The cold seeps immediate and insidious through the wound, numbing the edges while amplifying the throb deep within, the air crisp with pine resin and gun smoke that mutates the steamy jungle's fetid haze into a crystalline bite nipping at your exposed skin. Your wet wool breeches once drenched in monsoon torrents now stiffening with frost and blood that crusts in the chill, chafing your uninjured leg with a prickly insistence like needles woven into the fabric, while the iron on your teeth clenches from biting down on a leather strap to stifle your groan, metallic and coppery now laced with the tang of your own blood bubbling from the bite mark. You crawl behind a fallen log, the physical event exploding as Wampanoag warriors under Metacom whom you call King Philip, in mocking deference charge through the underbrush, their war whoops echoing off frozen trees like shattering glass, axes glinting in the weak winter sun as your militia fires erratic volleys, powder flashing bright and acrid, shocking you with the sight of a fellow settler crumpling nearby, his scalp lifted in a swift, ritual motion that leaves his head a bloody ruin, a sad ritual of vengeance for land stolen and treaties trampled, empathy surging through your pain-hazed mind for these native fighters defending hearths against your relentless encroachment, their families huddled in longhouses facing starvation as your farms devour hunting grounds that sustained them for generations. A fascinating tidbit pierces your delirium amid the chaos warriors sometimes coated arrow tips with rattlesnake venom milked fresh from fangs, an absurd toxin that swelled wounds into festering horrors, turning minor hits into agonizing deaths that mocked European medicine's leech and prayer remedies. Zoom out for a frosted whisper, and the New England wilderness sprawls like a white-shrouded battlefield, where rivers freeze into glassy veins carrying away the blood of clashing worlds, connecting frontier skirmishes in a tapestry of mistrust that frays with every broken promise. You yank the arrow free with a guttural cry, fabric tearing as blood wells hot and dark against the snow, the sensory struggle mounting as frostbite nips at your fingers, fumbling for bandages torn from your shirt, the cold crawling up your limbs like icy vines that numb and burn in tandem, making each movement a negotiation with agony, and sarcasm freezes on your lips, Splendid alliance building, inviting natives to trade only to fence them out, like hosting a block party then building a wall mid-fest. Worse than a social media friend request that turns into a block after you snoop their profile. The clash intensifies. Your line breaking as Philip's coalition Narragansett, Nipmuc, allies forged in desperation flanks from the trees, their moccasins silent on the crusty ground while your boots crunch betrayingly loud. Revisiting Roanoke's lost ghosts with a surprising twist. Those vanished souls perhaps assimilated here among the tribes. Whispers of English words in native tongues hinting at survival through surrender. A fate your rigid Puritan pride rejects even as it dooms you. Historians debating whether the war's ferocity stemmed from cultural clash or simple land lust. An uncertainty that hangs in the frosty air like breath clouds. Lessons learned in massacred villages where underestimating indigenous unity led to proportional devastation that scarred both sides forever. A modern comparison crystallizes in your shivering thoughts. It's like gentrifying a neighborhood, pushing out locals with rising rents, only to face backlash protests that torch your coffee shops, where the developers win but the community fractures irreparably. You rally with a shout, firing your musket into the fray, the recoil jarring your wound afresh as smoke billows choking and grey, shocking you with the fall of a young warrior no older than your son back home, his body crumpling in the snow with a final gasp that steams briefly before freezing, a sad emblem of youth wasted in cycles of revenge where fathers bury sons on both sides. Empathy, thawing your resolve for a moment as you imagine his mother's wail, echoing across tribal lands stripped bare by your expanding settlements. The iron taste sharpens with powder residue licked from chapped lips, wet wool cracking now with ice that forms in the folds, shedding flakes like dandruff from a giant's scalp, and sarcasm bites through the pain. Bravo on your civilizing mission. Teaching scripture with one hand while stealing land with the other, like a life coach who pickpockets you during sessions. Worse than a viral self-help guru exposed as a fraud mid-seminar. Zoom out once more. And the frontier's frozen expanse gleams under a pallid sun like a vast, indifferent mirror cracked with battle lines, reflecting shattered alliances in shards that cut deep into history's flesh. You press a makeshift tourniquet, the fabric biting into your thigh like a noose of necessity, as the skirmish wanes with retreating shadows, leaving the field littered with bodies stiffening in the cold, and the psychological chill deepens as doubt creeps in. What if these frozen betrayals are just the prelude? Alliances shattering like ice, only to melt into rivers of blood that carve deeper divides ahead. You crumple the stamped parchment in your fist, its edges slicing your palm like whispered indictments from a distant king, drawing thin lines of blood that well with the sting of injustice. And you ponder the absurdity that the Stamp Act of 1765 taxed everything from newspapers to playing cards, squeezing an extra shilling from colonists who already bled sweat for the empire's wars, turning everyday paper into chains that bound a continent's growing fury. Did you know one Boston printer burned through a year's profits just to comply? His ink-stained hands trembling as he stamped away his livelihood. The harbour wind whips chill through your coat, carrying the briny tang of Boston's waters that lap at the wharves like restless tongues tasting rebellion. The fog evolving from frontier frosts into a salty veil that clings to your lashes and blurs the lanterns bobbing on ships laden with East India tea. Your wet wool greatcoat once frozen stiff in New England's winters, now damp with sea spray that seeps cold into your bones, chafing your neck raw like a collar of royal decree, while the iron on your teeth grinds from clenching a quill between them, metallic and sharp as the tax collector's quill that scribes your ruin. You slip into the shadowed alley behind the customs house, the physical event igniting as Sons of Liberty gather in hushed knots, tar buckets sloshing black and viscous, feathers rustling in sacks like captured birds plotting escape. And you daub your face with soot that smears gritty and acrid, stinging your eyes as the group surges toward the docks under cover of night, axes glinting dull in the mist, shocking you with the crash of chests splintering open, tea leaves spilling into the harbour like a brown tide of defiance, a sad cascade where fortunes in fragrant cargo dissolve into worthless brine. empathy welling for the merchants back in London who'll wake to news of their losses. Families paupered by this act of protest that pits brother against brother across the ocean. A fascinating tidbit brews in your disguised mind amid the chaos revolutionaries sometimes brewed Liberty tea from raspberry leaves as a boycott brew. An absurd herbal substitute that tasted of earth and resistance. Bitter as the taxes it mocked, far from the exotic blends now floating away. Zoom out for a misty reverie, and the harbour stretches like a darkened mirror reflecting fractured lanterns, where waves cradle the sinking leaves in a watery grave, connecting colonial wharves to imperial halls in a ripple of unrest that swells with each denied right. You heft another chest overboard, the sensory struggle mounting as splinters jab your palms like accusing needles, salt water splashing up to chill your thighs and soak your breeches further, the cold crawling up your spine in shivers that mingle with the thrill of treason, making your heart pound erratic against ribs that ache from the haul, and sarcasm bubbles through your muffled grunts, marvellous taxation without representation, like getting billed for a party you weren't invited to, worse than a streaming service charging extra for ads you never wanted, where the king plays host but you're the one footing the feast. The night erupts in shouts as redcoats spot the masquerade, muskets cracking sharp in the fog, bullets whizzing past your ear like angry bees, and you duck behind crates that splinter under fire, revisiting Clive's Plassey betrayals with a surprising twist. The company's tea monopoly now sparks this revolt, where Bengal's plundered leaves fuel Boston's fury, turning Eastern exploitation into Western rebellion. Historians debating whether the Tea Party was spontaneous rage or calculated theatre by smugglers like Hancock protecting their black market brew, an uncertainty that hangs in the gun smoke. Lessons learned in harbour depths, where symbolic acts ignite real wars. Common mistakes like Parliament's arrogance in ignoring colonial assemblies, treating them as children to be taxed rather than partners to consult. A modern comparison steeps in your racing thoughts. It's like a corporate tax hike on gig workers who built the app economy, sparking boycotts that crash servers and stock prices, where the boardroom kings learn too late that overreach brews backlash stronger than any blend. You scramble across the wharf, tea dust coating your tongue in a powdery bitterness that chokes like swallowed pride, the iron taste sharpening with adrenaline's metallic edge, and the shocking element strikes as a young apprentice falls wounded beside you, his mohawk disguise slipping to reveal boyish features twisted in pain. A sad youth caught in adult games of empire and ego, empathy crushing you for the families waiting at home. Hearths cold with worry as suns vanish into the night for liberty's elusive promise. The fog thickens as you melt into the alleys, redcoats' boots pounding pursuit but losing your trail in the maze. Sarcasm whispering through your heaving breaths cheers to the declaratory act, asserting Parliament's right to bind in all cases whatsoever, like a bad break-up text claiming eternal control after you've already packed your bags, worse than an ex who won't delete your number. Zoom out once more, and the Boston skyline silhouettes against the moonlit mist like jagged teeth in a snarling maw, where harbour waters churn with steeped rebellion, each ripple carrying echoes of stamps torn and tea drowned that swell into tidal waves of change. You huddle in a safe house, wound bandaged rough with linen that sticks to the drying blood, the chill settling deeper as dawn approaches grey and unforgiving, and the psychological mood shifts to tense anticipation. What brews next in these shadows of injustice, where parchment accusations ignite furies that no fog can fully veil? You stagger through the acrid veil of gunpowder smoke that sears your throat like inhaled embers from a forge gone mad, its bitter haze clawing at your lungs until each cough racks your chest with fire, and you marvel at the twisted tally that during the Battle of Saratoga in 1777, a ragtag colonial force of farmers and merchants trapped 6,000 British troops in a muddy noose, forcing surrender in a stunning upset that lured France into the fray. Did you know one desperate redcoat regiment lost half its men to dysentery before a single shot, their bowels betraying them worse than any traitor? The mist rolls thick over the Hudson Valley fields, evolved from Boston's salty fog into a clammy shroud that slicks the ground into sucking mud, pulling at your boots with greedy slurps that threaten to yank you down into the earth like a grave opening premature. Your wet wool uniform, once damp with harbour spray, now caked in grime and gore that hardens into a crusty armour, chafing your thighs raw with every slogging step. while the iron on your teeth grinds from clamping on a cartridge, torn open with your incisors. Metallic and powdery mingled with the coppery spurt of blood from a split lip, sharp as the bayonet glinting ahead. You charge forward in the melee, the physical event erupting as colonial militia pour fire from tree lines, bullets whistling past your ear like vengeful wasps, splintering bark and flesh alike, and you fire back blindly into the haze, musket bucking against your bruised shoulder with a thunderous kick that jars your bones, shocking you with the crumple of a young drummer boy at your side, his instrument silenced mid-beat as blood blooms on his coat like a crimson flower, a sad youth whose march to glory ends in muddied anonymity, empathy flooding your smoke-stung eyes for the families across the ocean, or colonies who'll receive folded flags instead of suns, their hearths forever dimmed by this war of kin against kin. A fascinating tidbit flashes amid the Chaos Soldiers' sometimes stuffed wounds with spiderwebs gathered from barn corners. An absurd natural bandage thought to staunch bleeding like nature's gauze, clumping sticky and crawling with unseen mites that itched worse than the pain itself. Zoom out for a hazy interlude, and the battlefield unfurls like a torn tapestry woven with red threads, where rivers of retreat carry away dreams of empire in currents, cold and unforgiving, connecting distant crowns to colonial fields in a fraying bond of blood. You reload, frantic powder spilling from trembling hands into the pan, the sensory struggle intensifying as mud cakes your knees from crawling through ditches, its chill seeping up your legs like rising venom that numbs and aches in tandem, blisters bursting on your feet from endless marches that turn socks to bloody rags, and sarcasm hisses through your gritted teeth. Splendid revolution, where liberty's cry drowns in the muck of brotherly slaughter, like a family feud at Thanksgiving escalating to lawsuits over the last slice of pie, worse than a Twitter spat that spirals into doxing and deleted accounts, where words wound deeper than lead. The tide turns at Saratoga's climax, Burgoyne's grand plan crumbling as your lines falter under Gates' relentless push, French arms tipping the scales in a twist revisiting Clive's plassy bribes. Now it's Yankee resolve backed by bourbon gold that betrays the Empire's overstretch, where redcoats like you stretch thin across oceans, face locals who know every hollow and hill, historians debating whether Saratoga was tactical brilliance or British blunder in dividing forces, an uncertainty that echoes in the cannon's roar, lessons learned in surrendered swords where arrogance in logistics spells defeat louder than any volley, common mistakes like underestimating home advantage, as if invading a neighbour's yard only to trip on their garden hose. A modern comparison loads like a fresh round. It's like a tech giant suing startups for patent infringement, only to lose when the little guy's crowdsourced defences that bankrupt the bully, turning corporate might into meme-worthy mockery. You fall back as orders ring out, the shocking retreat leaving comrades twisted in the grass, their eyes staring vacant at the mist-shrouded sky, a sad harvest of youth reaped by ambition's scythe. Empathy crushing you for the indigenous allies on both sides, caught in white men's quarrels that devour their lands regardless of victor, their war paints running in the rain like tears for betrayed pacts. The iron taste evolves with bile from swallowing fear, wet wool sloughing mud in clumps that plop heavy as accusations, and sarcasm cuts through the rout hurrah for the king's finest, routing like startled deer, like a CEO fleeing a boardroom coup with his golden parachute snagged on the door. Zoom out once more, and the valley mists swirl like departing spirits, veiling the fallen in ethereal grey where victories taste of pyrrhic ash, each drifting wisp hiding histories of what-ifs that dissolve into legend. You limp to regroup, wound throbbing in rhythm with distant drums, the psychological chill deepening as doubt creeps like frost. What irreversible tang lingers in these mists of change, where losses forge nations but leave empires tasting their own bitter medicine. You inhale the first cloying whiff of opium smoke curling from the pipe like a serpent's sigh, its sticky sweetness invading your nostrils and coating your tongue with a velvet numbness that dulls the world's edges into hazy dreams. And you stagger at the statistic that by the 1830s, British opium exports to China had ballooned to 40,000 chests annually, enough narcotic to addict millions and tip the trade balance in favour of an empire that peddled destruction as commerce, forcing a proud Qing dynasty to its knees in wars waged over flowers that bloomed into societal rot. The heat oppresses like a living blanket smothered over Bengal's poppy fields, sun-baked earth radiating waves that shimmer the air and bake your skin until it tightens painfully. The aroma of blooming pods thick and heady, mutating the gunpowder haze of Saratoga into a narcotic fog that clogs your lungs with each laboured breath, making your head swim in dizzy spirals. Your wet wool curter, once mud-caked in revolutionary fields, now sweat-sodden and clinging like a second skin sloughing in the humidity, chafing your chest raw with friction that burns hotter than the sun's glare, while the iron on your teeth dulls to opium-tinged numbness from chewing a pod's resin for fleeting relief. Metallic sweetness that lingers like the Empire's false promises. You wander the fields as a company overseer, the physical event unfolding when peasants bent double under the harvest scythes glance up with hollow eyes, their backs arched permanent from endless toil, and you supervise the lancing of pods, milky latex oozing sticky and white like wounds weeping secrets, shocking you with the sight of a young cultivator collapsing in the furrows, his body convulsing from overwork and the very drug he harvests, a sad figure whose family will starve without his labour, empathy flooding your opium-clouded veins for these Bihar farmers trapped in monopoly fields where the company dictates prices that barely feed, turning ancestral lands into prisons of addiction, exported afar, their children inheriting bent spines and empty bellies as legacy. A fascinating tidbit drifts through the haze like smoke company doctors sometimes prescribed opium-laced laudanum for everything from toothaches to melancholy, an absurd universal cure-all that hooked patients as surely as it did markets, bottles clinking in apothecaries like tiny vials of imperial hypnosis, zoom out for a languid drift, and the Ganges plain unfurls like an opium dreamscape, rivers snaking silver through poppy seas where blooms nod in hypnotic rhythm, connecting Indian soil to Chinese ports in a narcotic chain that binds empires in mutual ruin, each petal hiding petals of profit soaked in human wilt. You board a clipper bound for Canton, the sensory struggle mounting as seasickness roils your gut amid the hold's reek of stacked chests, tar and latex mingling in a nauseous brew that turns your stomach to churning acid, blisters reforming on your hands from hauling ropes that fray and bite in the salt spray. The heat below decks a stifling oven where sweat pours unending, stinging your eyes like tears unshed for the addicts awaiting this cargo. Sarcasm curls lazy in your addled thoughts, brilliant free trade, forcing opium down China's throat while preaching moral superiority. Like a pharma giant pushing pills for ailments they invented, worse than a social media algorithm addicting users to rage for ad clicks, where the high is profit and the crash is societal collapse. The voyage drags through typhoon-lashed waves, and you revisit Clive's Plassey victory with a hazy twist. His Bengal conquest now funds this drug empire, where Nawab's treasuries fill company coffers that buy poppies to break Qing resolve, turning military triumph into mercantile menace. Historians debating whether the opium wars were economic inevitability or moral nadir, an uncertainty swirling in the pipe smoke. Lessons learned in Canton factories where underestimating Chinese resistance led to humiliations that scarred pride deeper than any lance. A modern comparison hazes into view. It's like vaping companies targeting teens with fruity flavors, hooking a generation while denying the harm, profits soaring as lungs blacken and regulators dither. You dock in Canton, the shocking bustle of the 13 factories overwhelming with shouts and scents of tea and silk. But undercover agents like you smuggle chests past Qing bands, bribing officials whose palms grease with silver that buys silence. A sad corruption where emperor's edicts dissolve in avarice, empathy aching for the addicts in opium dens, their bodies wasted shadows piping away lives in clouds that veil families' despair, mothers weeping for sons lost to the haze. The iron taste fades to opium's dull euphoria, wet wool steaming in the coastal heat now laced with incense from temples, praying against foreign devils. And sarcasm whispers dreamy cheers to the Treaty of Nanking in 1842, seeding Hong Kong like a forced gift, like a bully taking your lunch money then making you thank him. Worse than a bad trade deal where you lose your ports and gain only humiliation. Zoom out once more, and the South China Sea gleams under hazy suns like a vast opium-veiled mirror, reflecting fractured horizons where empires expand on fragile fumes, each wave carrying whispers of crumbling wills that dissolve into ether. You wander Hong Kong's budding streets, the narcotic trade-building warehouses that rise like monuments to vice, the psychological chill seeping through the high as doubt clouds your vision. What crumbling illusions lie in this eastern haze, where addictions forge chains that bind nations in shared delirium. You blister your souls on the scorching sands of the Kalahari Fringe, each grain shifting underfoot like a million tiny teeth gnawing at your flesh, embedding heat that radiates up your legs in waves of agony that make you hobble like a condemned man toward an unseen gallows. And you question the madness that in the 1884 Berlin Conference, European powers carved up Africa like a holiday roast, without a single African present, redrawing boundaries that ignored tribes, rivers, and histories, condemning millions to fractured futures where one village might wake up Belgian and its neighbour British overnight. Did you know Cecil Rhodes dreamed of a Cape to Cairo railway painted red on the map? But it cost thousands of lives in forced labour gangs that dropped dead from malaria and whips, turning desert dreams into graveyards of ambition. The sun hammers down merciless, baking the air into a shimmering furnace that warps the horizon like a fever vision. The dry wind carrying dust that grits your eyes and throat, mutating the opium haze from eastern ports into a parched veil that scratches your lungs with every inhale, making breaths rasp shallow and painful. Your wet wool trousers, once sodden in monsoon deluges, now sand-caked and abrasive, chafing your inner thighs into raw welts that weep clear fluid under the friction of endless trudging, while the iron on your teeth clenches from gnawing on a strip of dried biltong for sustenance, metallic and leathery mingled with the salt of your own sweat that drips ceaseless from your brow, sharp as the thorn bushes snagging your sleeves like skeletal hands clutching for mercy denied. You press forward with a prospecting party, the physical event erupting as Zulu impis emerge from acacia shadows, their assegai spears flashing in the glare like lightning bolts forged from the sun itself, clashing against your Martini Henry rifles in a cacophony of grunts and steel that echoes across the savannah, shocking you with the crumple of a porter at your side, his body pierced through and twitching in the dust as blood pools dark and thirsty into the sand. A sad son of the soil whose village was razed for diamond claims, empathy surging through your sun-baked veins for these warriors defending ancestral grazing lands against your map-wielding invaders, their families scattered like chaff in the wind of white men's whims, herds stolen and spirits broken in the name of progress that progresses only for the few. A fascinating tidbit burrows into your heat-muddled brain amid the fray explorers sometimes wore hats lined with cork to deflect the sun's rays. An absurd, bulbous headgear that bobbed like clownish crowns on sweating brows, offering scant shield against the heat stroke that felled more men than spears ever did. Zoom out for a scorched reverie, and the African vastness sprawls like an endless hide stretched taut under the sky's merciless blue, where thorn bushes cluster like barbed sentinels guarding secrets of gold and ivory, connecting coastal enclaves to interior heartlands in a scramble that redraws lives with the casual stroke of a quill dipped in sweat and stolen futures. You reload your rifle, fingers blistered and fumbling on the hot barrel that singes like a branding iron, the sensory struggle intensifying as thorns rake your arms in retreat, drawing blood that attracts swarms of tsetse flies, buzzing insistent and biting, their pricks swelling your skin into itchy mounds that pulse with infection's promise under the relentless sun that bakes your scalp through your pith helmet, making vision swim in mirages of water that taunt like illusions of empire's endless wealth. Sarcasm parches your cracked lips' brilliant scramble, slicing continents over brandy in Berlin salons while we bleed in the bush, like tech bros divvying up startups at a conference. Worse than a Zoom call where the powerful log off and the peons pay the lag, where maps ignore mountains and men alike. The clash wanes as your party scatters the attackers, but victory sours with the capture of a chief's son, chained now to a wagon wheel, his defiant eyes mirroring the injustice of Lobengula's Matabele kingdom, crumbling under Rhodes' British South Africa Company charters from 1889 revisiting Clive's Bengal betrayals, with a dusty twist. Here, it's mining rights tricked from Ndebele rulers with guns disguised as gifts, turning oral agreements into paper prisons that swallow sovereignty. Historians debating whether the scramble was economic imperative or racial delusion, an uncertainty baked into the savannah's heat waves. Lessons learned in thorn-scarred retreats, where ignoring tribal boundaries sows wars that thorn the empire's side for generations. Common mistakes like assuming blank maps meant empty lands, blind to the lives etched invisible upon them. A modern comparison shimmers like a heat mirage. It's like fracking firms promising jobs while poisoning wells, locals rising with pitchforks only to face corporate lawyers who redraw deeds overnight, profits gushing while communities dry up and wither. You bind your thorn-lacerated hand with a rag, the fabric sticking to weeping cuts that throb in rhythm with distant tribal drums, echoing pain across the veld, shocking you with the wail of a village burned in reprisal. Flames devouring thatch roofs as women flee with babes clutched tight. A sad exodus where ancient rhythms fracture under Maxim guns' chatter. Empathy aching in your dust-caked chest for the displaced who wander wastelands once home. Their cattle seized for company herds that fatten on stolen grass. The iron taste fades to sandy grit ground between molars. Wet wool shedding dust in puffs that dance like desert spirits. And sarcasm whispers dry as the wind hurrah for the civilizing mission, bringing rails and rifles to redraw lives in red ink, like a urban planner bulldozing neighborhoods for highways that lead nowhere good. Worse than an app update that erases your data without backup. Zoom out once more, and the savanna thorns pierce the horizon like nature's barbs against intruders, where drumbeats pulse eternal under a sky vast and unforgiving, each echo hiding futures redrawn in sweat and sorrow that bleed into the sand. You limp onward, the psychological chill creeping despite the blaze as mirages mock with visions of home. What stolen horizons lurk in these thorny expanses, where maps promise dominion but deliver only endless pricks of conscience. You huddle deeper into the trench's oozing wall as the first artillery shell whistles overhead, like a banshee's wail cutting through the pre-dawn gloom, exploding in a thunderous bloom that showers you with clods of mud heavy as accusations from the earth itself. And you shudder at the grim arithmetic that during the Battle of the Somme in 1916 over 1 million men fell in 5 months of mechanized slaughter. Did you know one British division lost 5,000 soldiers in the first hour alone? Their bodies churned into the Flanders fields like forgotten ingredients in a devil's stew, turning poppy-strewn meadows into graveyards where the living envied the dead. The mud sucks at your boots with a possessive slurp, cold and viscous like the grasp of drowned hands pulling you under, the air rank with cordite's acrid bite and the rot of unburied limbs that wafts in waves, mutating the savannah's dusty thorns from Africa into a clammy sludge that invades every pore, making breaths rasp, wet and laboured through phlegm-clogged throats. Your wet wool tunic, once sand-caked in thorny scrambles, now a sodden tomb encasing your torso, swelling with rainwater that freezes in the night chill and chafes your ribs raw like sandpaper woven from despair, while the iron on your teeth grinds from clamping on a cigarette butt for fleeting warmth, metallic and sooty mingled with the bile rising from your empty gut, sharp as the barbed wire glinting above the parapet like a crown of thorns for this modern crucifixion. You scramble as orders bark through the murk, the physical event erupting when Indian sepoys from the Punjab charge alongside you over the top, their turbans bobbing in the gas-laced fog as machine guns stutter death in rhythmic bursts, stitching the air with a lead that winds past your ear, shocking you with the crumple of a Sikh comrade whose chest blooms red mid-stride, his kirpan clattering useless in the muck as life ebbs from eyes that dreamed of Ganges sunsets far from this hellish quagmire. A sad son of empire whose valour buys inches of ground, while his family back home starves under wartime requisitions. Empathy flooding your trench-fevered heart for these colonial troops over 1 million from India alone who crossed oceans to fight for a king who'd never share their curry or understand their gods, their shared blood-watering foreign fields in a brotherhood forged in betrayal. A fascinating tidbit sloshes through your muddled thoughts Amid the barrage soldiers sometimes fashioned periscopes from broken mirrors and bayonets to peer over the top without losing heads, an absurd contraption that reflected the war's fractured reality back at them like a carnival funhouse gone grotesque. Spotting snipers through shards that cut fingers as surely as shrapnel. Zoom out for a shell-shocked pause, and the Western Front stretches like a scarred artery pulsing with the world's borrowed blood, where trenches snake endless through no man's land, connecting distant dominions to Europe's madness in a web of wire and woe that binds humanity in mutual annihilation. You claw forward through the craters, the sensory struggle mounting as mustard gas drifts yellow and insidious, blistering your skin in invisible flames that bubble and weep under your uniform, the burn crawling up your arms like acid vines that throttle breath and vision, making eyes water rivers of pain while rats scuttle over your boots, their whiskers brushing like tiny accusations in the dark, fat from feasting on the fallen. Sarcasm gurgles in your gas-masked wheeze glorious global sacrifice, dragging colonies into your family feud like inviting cousins to a barbecue that turns into a brawl. Worse than a group chat exploding over politics where everyone blocks everyone but the drama drags on, where the Empire calls for aid only to forget the faces who answered. The line holds as Anzac diggers from down under reinforce, their slouch hats muddied but spirits fierce. Revisiting Rhodes' African scrambles with a muddy twist those thorn-pierced prospectors, now trench-bound brothers, where Boer War grudges fade in shared shellfire, turning old foes into foxhole allies against the Kaiser's machine. Historians debating whether colonial contributions were voluntary valour or coerced cannon fodder, an uncertainty buried in the mud like unexploded ordnance waiting to detonate debates. Lessons learned in mass graves where underestimating Dominion loyalty forged an empire's backbone only to strain it near breaking. Common mistakes like stretching supply lines thin across oceans that left men starving for bullets and bread. A modern comparison muddies your foxhole reverie. It's like crowdfunding a blockbuster movie with global backers, only for the stars to hog the credits while extras get buried in fine print. Profits rolling in as the cast party ignores the crew who bled for the scenes. You hunker as shells rain anew, the shocking barrage flattening a section where Canadian troops vanish in earth fountains, their maple leaf badges glinting brief in the blast before burial. A sad northern contingent whose Vimy Ridge charge later carves victory from carnage, empathy aching in your shell-shocked chest for these volunteers from frozen prairies who trade blizzards for bombardments, their letters home stained with trench ink and unspoken horrors, families waiting across Atlantic voids for sons who'll return hollow if at all. The iron taste sharpens with dirt swallowed in dives for cover, wet wool sloughing mud in slabs that plop like accusations, and sarcasm rasps through the din hurrah for the war to end all wars, uniting the globe in mutual misery, like a viral challenge that spreads suffering for likes, worse than a meme that goes global only to memify mass graves. Zoom out once more, and the front lines etch across Europe like festering wounds on a giant's hide, where distant guns rumble eternal, each echo watering fields with blood from far horizons that seep into soil forever changed. You peer through the periscope's shard, the psychological chill deepening as gas masks muffle screams into ghostly moans, what shared injustices rumble in these trench echoes, where global sacrifice waters seeds of independence that will bloom in the fading warmth of Empire's sun. You clutch at the bloodied fabric of your kurta as another wave of frenzied bodies surges past, their shoulders slamming into yours like battering rams forged from desperation and hate, knocking the air from your lungs in a whoosh that leaves you gasping amid the choking dust that rises in swirling clouds, gritty particles invading your eyes until tears carve clean tracks down your dirt-smeared cheeks. And you can't fathom the nightmarish scale that in the chaotic blur of partition's birth in 1947 trains meant for hopeful migrants arrived at stations transformed into rolling slaughterhouses, with up to 75% of passengers hacked to pieces by mobs wielding kirpans and talwars, their blood painting the carriages in streaks that dried black under the relentless sun. Did you know one such ghost train from Lahore to Amritsar carried over 1,000 corpses? their silent stares accusing the mapmakers who drew lines in air-conditioned offices. Oblivious to the rivers of red they'd unleash, the August blaze hammers down without mercy, turning the Punjab air into a furnace breath that scorches your throat raw. Each inhale pulling in the metallic tang of spilled blood, mixed with the acrid smoke from burning villages on the horizon, where flames leap like vengeful spirits devouring thatched roofs and lives alike, mutating the opium's dreamy haze from eastern fields into a hellish veil that stings your skin and blurs your vision with heat waves dancing, mocking on the cracked earth. Your wet wool solwar, once caked in trench mud from distant fronts, now a sweat-soaked rag clinging to your legs like a shroud woven from fever dreams, swelling and chafing your inner thighs into blistering welts that weep with every frantic step, the friction burning hotter than the sand underfoot, while the iron on your teeth grinds from clamping on a shard of sugarcane scavenged from a looted cart, metallic and fibrous mingled with the coppery spurt of blood from your bitten tongue, sharp as the daggers flashing in the crowd where faith turns neighbour into executioner. You lurch forward in the human tide, the physical event erupting as a Hindu mob descends on a cluster of Muslim refugees, or perhaps it's reversed in this inverting madness, where identities blur into targets, axes rising and falling in rhythmic horror that splatters warm flecks across your face, shocking you with the grotesque crumple of a young mother shielding her infant, her sari ripping as blades bite deep, the child's wail piercing the din before silencing forever in a puddle that spreads dark and accusatory under the sun, a sad tableau of innocence extinguished in the name of new nations born from old hatreds, empathy crushing your dust-clogged chest for these faceless millions, Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims torn from ancestral homes by Radcliffe's arbitrary lines drawn in mere weeks, families splintered like kindling for the pyres that dot the landscape, their pyres crackling with the remains of those who couldn't outrun the frenzy, grandmothers clutching prayer beads as flames consume memories woven over generations. A fascinating tidbit claws through the pandemonium like a thorn in your fleeing mind. Border officials sometimes stamped passports with ink made from crushed berries scavenged from roadside bushes, an absurd makeshift dye that smeared and faded under the sweat of terror, sealing fates with stains as transient as the promises of safety that evaporated like morning dew in this cauldron of chaos. Zoom out for a blistering breadth, and the Indo-Pak plains unfurl like a vast, hemorrhaging wound gashed open by colonial scalpels, where rivers swell with bloated bodies drifting downstream like forsaken offerings, connecting ancient Indus valleys to modern mass graves in a crimson thread that weaves sorrow into the soil, each ripple echoing the partition's parting gift of perpetual ache. You shove against the press of bodies, elbows jabbing ribs in a desperate bid for space, the sensory struggle mounting as thorns from overgrown verges snag your arms, tearing fabric and flesh in shallow gashes that ooze sticky under the sun's glare, attracting flies that buzz insistent and land on the wounds, their legs crawling like tiny invaders probing for weakness, while blisters on your heels burst from the relentless march, pus mingling with sweat into a stinging slurry that turns every footfall into a wince of fire, the heat radiating up your calves in pulses that sync with the distant wails of the lost and the lamenting. Sarcasm wheezes through your parched throat like a dry cough. Oh, masterful decolonization, slicing a subcontinent in half like a hasty cake cut at a farewell party gone wrong. Worse than a corporate restructure that fires half the staff overnight without severance, where the executives jet off while the workers scramble for scraps in the rubble. Borders drawn with the casual arrogance of men who viewed lives as dots on a map rather than beating hearts with histories. The frenzy peaks as you crest a hill overlooking a refugee camp, tents sagging under the weight of despair like wilted sails on beached ships, where thousands huddle in squalor, cholera whispering through the ranks as water sources foul with the dead, shocking you with the sight of a Sikh elder self-immolating in protest, flames engulfing his turban and beard in a halo of defiance that illuminates faces twisted in horror, a sad act of ultimate resistance against the invisible lines that severed communities like a guillotine through kin, empathy aching deep in your sun-scorched soul for the orphans wandering wide-eyed amid the tents, their tiny hands clutching rags that once were toys, now talismans against the night terrors of separation and slaughter. Families evaporated in the heat of hate, fueled by rumors and radios blaring divisive decrees. A modern comparison scorches your fleeing reverie like the sun on your neck. It's like a viral social media purge where algorithms divide friends into echo chambers, sparking digital witch hunts that spill into real-world riots, worse than an app update that splits user bases into feuding factions. Profits for the platform while users pay in fractured bonds and lost connections. You plunge into the camp's throng, elbows and shoulders a barrage in the human sea. Revisiting Mountbatten's hasty handover, with a dust-choked twist the Viceroy's acceleration of independence from June 1948 to August 1947, a mere 10 months shaved off, like a barber's rushed shave that draws blood, turning what could have been orderly withdrawal into a bloodbath of unprepared borders, where Radcliffe's committee sketched lines in secrecy, ignoring pleas from locals whose villages straddled the divide, historians debating whether this speed was to evade mounting violence or simply to wash hands of the mess quicker, an uncertainty buried in the mass graves dotting the Punjab. Lessons learned too late in refugee swells where haste in decolonization sowed seeds of enmity that sprout wars for generations. Common mistakes like assuming religious harmony could withstand arbitrary divisions, blind to the tinderbox of tensions ignited by colonial divide and rule that now exploded in independence's ironic firework. The sun dips toward a blood-red horizon, casting long shadows that dance like elongated ghosts over the exodus, and you collapse against a bullock cart's wheel, its spokes creaking under the weight of piled belongings salvaged from looted homes, the psychological chill creeping despite the lingering heat as memories flash of pre-partition harmony, neighbours sharing Diwali sweets or Eid feasts, now poisoned by the venom of separation that turns friends into foes overnight, a mood shifting to hollow exhaustion, what fading empires leave in their wake but crowns of thorned regret, where partitions promise freedom but deliver only the dust of divided dreams. You rise unsteadily as night falls, stars pricking the sky like distant judgments, the campfires flickering weak against the dark where stories of loss whisper around the flames, elders recounting villages razed and kin vanished, their voices cracking with grief that echoes your own inner fracture, and you wander the perimeter. Thorns brushing your legs in gentle reminders of Africa's scrambles now mirrored in this Asian unravelling, the wet wool shedding dust in nocturnal dew that softens its chafe to a dull itch, iron fading from your teeth to a whisper of thirst quenched by shared water from a stranger's gourd, the absurdity of it all settling like sediment in a stirred pond, how an empire that spanned suns sets in such chaotic twilight, leaving legacies that linger like smoke after the fire dies. The wind picks up cool, carrying faint cries from distant clashes, but here in the camp's fragile truce, a Muslim offers you a blanket woven from threads of shared humanity, a small act defying the division, yet the sad undercurrent persists in the orphaned silent stares. Their futures partitioned into uncertainty, where education and homes dissolve in the migration's maw. Empathy, a constant throb like your thorn-scratched arms. Historians still arguing if Mountbatten's rush stemmed from strategic retreat or personal impatience to return home. Debates in leather-bound tomes that ignore the human calculus of 2 million dead and 15 million displaced. Lessons in the folly of hasty exits where colonial architects build houses of cards then flee the collapse. Sarcasm fades to weary irony, farewell to the jewel in the crown, polished with blood and handed off in shards, like an heirloom vase shattered in a divorce. Pieces claimed but wholeness lost forever. Worse than a blockchain split forking currencies into warring tokens, where holders lose value and the forks fall out. You lie down on the hard ground, the earth's pulse slow beneath you, stars wheeling overhead in indifferent arcs, and the wind down begins as the camp quiets. Fires banking to embers that glow soft and fading, their warmth ebbing like the Empire's grasp, loosening finger by finger, the dust settling gentle over sleeping forms, breath synchronizing in ragged harmony with the night's soft hush. Thorns retreating into shadows where they blend with the dark, wet wool drying to a whisper of fabric against skin, iron dissolving from your teeth into the quiet void of rest, the borders blurring in dreams where lines melt like wax under a gentler sun. Crowns fading into mist that drifts lazy over silent plains, empty chairs gathering dew in forgotten halls where echoes soften to sighs, soft breathing merging with the wind's murmur, the ache unwinding slow as a river finding sea, legacies drifting like leaves on a calming stream, until all fades to whisper,